So this first masterclass is going to be about actual storytelling and what ingredients you need to create an engaging story, how to go about doing that, what teams to build, what partnerships to build. And we've got some fantastic speakers today, so it should be a really, really good session.
I just wanted to share with you a couple of insights from the research The Economist has done a couple of months ago on thought leadership, which obviously is a type of content. What we did, we interviewed about 2,000 executives, both from the marketing side and the general executive, different sectors, which are more of the users of thought leadership or advertisement. And what we found from this research is that it's really, people are really consuming and pay attention to good thought leadership, but in a way there is so much content around there, they're kind of confused or overwhelmed about all this content. So what they do is really try to be very selective, and the only kind of content which is being noticed is the content which is perceived as being compelling, innovative, big picture, credible. Credible is a very important word here. They are not actually very impressed with content which is superficial, sales-driven, or biased.
I'll give you an example of what isn't a story and then what is a story. This isn't a story. A New York City police detective flies to LA on Christmas Eve to reconcile with his wife at her office party. That's not a story. This is a story. New York City police detective flies to LA on Christmas Eve to reconcile with his wife, and terrorists take over the building. The last one is Die Hard, and it made millions and millions of dollars. And so what stories are there? And sometimes it's important to sort of state the obvious about stories. Stories are about human beings. And so if you're sort of selling brands, that's a real challenge, because you have to turn them into human stories. Companies, cars, machines, engineering, that's just not very compelling. What's compelling are human beings. And then there's the other challenge, I think, for content, which is the stories are about people who are in trouble. The hero's journey is the classic model of the story, which is, how does the hero, you can take Lord of the Rings, you have to get to the ring, and to get to the ring, you have to go through all sorts of challenges and overcome lots of monsters. And so all stories are about the hero or heroine trying to overcome something. And that's difficult to, I think, put into branded content, because you have to sort of acknowledge that there are challenges, that the product isn't just awesome and the world isn't a wonderful place for it. So that's really difficult. It's easier in journalism because we deal with wars and bankruptcies and all sorts of things. What we deal with is trouble, and it's a little more challenging, I think, for you guys.
Specifically for commercial content, one of the most important things in terms of storytelling is its relevance to the audience. And quite often we'll be sitting in a room and people come up with creative ideas without actually understanding who the end user is, who's going to be consuming this content, and how they're going to be interacting with it, where, and therefore how should the story play out. So before we even come up with ideas, I think a lot of marketers in particular lose sight of who they're creating this story for, or who they're telling the story to, and where. And in that sense, as odd as it may sound, data plays a big role in fueling that storytelling process. So how can you really understand who your audience is, how do they go about in their day, and therefore the story that you're wanting to tell them, where does that fit in within their journey, within their behavior? So relevance, not just for the audience, but also for the brand, and staying true to the brand values, so to speak, I think is quite important to any kind of commercial content that we're creating. And brands need to be open to be influenced by their consumers.
There's lots of ways of telling a story. You can describe the sky, you can describe a scene, but actually for it to be really compelling storytelling, you do need that tension, that hero figure. You need to root for something, and in my opinion, that's where branded content, commercial, editorial, native advertising, whatever we're calling it at the moment, that is historically where it's always fallen down.
have a lot of clients that come to us who think they're picking from a menu of items when they are asking for branded content. So they'll come to us and say, I want video, I want an infographic, I want an article. And you're like, that's great, but what story do you want to tell, right? So you have to think about what is the actual message and the story that you want to tell before thinking about the execution. And I think that's the greatest barrier that we see to content that performs well, is thinking about how we're going to do it. So you could make an infographic with 1,000 different levers, and it has 1 million different pages that it goes on to, but it's not going to perform as well as a really simple, clear, easy to understand piece that you remember and you can associate with the brand in the future.
I'll give you the 3 that come up most often. Objectives, 100%. Specifically, aligning objectives to KPIs. We'll get briefed on an engagement campaign and then we'll have lead gen KPIs. They don't match. And that's a problem because you're judging how well something is doing, but not on what you originally set out to do. It's very simple, but the discipline behind that is incredibly important. And I think often, especially when you're under time pressure, you don't always ask those questions and you're not always firm with that up front, but that saves a lot of hassle later on. Expectations would be the second, of everyone involved, but specifically clients and managing those. I've worked on lots of different clients, so please don't assume that I'm talking about anyone in particular. Clients inherently think they're more interesting than potentially they are. That's right. That's their everyday, that's their passion, that's their life, and they think that everything they're doing is wonderful. My journalist friends, I'm sure, will tell me that's not always the case. And we have to find a human story in there, and we have to make that interesting. We have to do a lot of insight to make sure that we're bringing the audience considerations in there. And that has to be handled sensitively, but also firmly. Like, you know, you can't let someone try and tell a story where there aren't characters, or there isn't a challenge, or there's not a human connection. It is better not to tell it at all sometimes. Finally, I would just say the biggest challenge is attention, right? Like, we all read our feeds all the time, and we've mentioned before, there is a lot of stuff in there. And people are bloody good at filtering stuff out. So we have to produce something excellent, and we have to do it within the limits of the current attention. And I think that sometimes we have to be very honest with ourselves, which is, you know, we're making content on behalf of our clients, but we're all people and we're making content for people. So we have to look at what we're doing and say, is it interesting? Would I read it? Would I share it? Not as someone who works in marketing, but someone as a human being. Would I go into my feed and would I read that?
One of the challenges is telling a story about the story, and the bar is very high for content because it has that little badge saying sponsored content, which is like saying, please do not read this, please do not, please don't engage with that, which makes it the bar that much higher. And so the story, so why would you engage with that? And so there has to be, with movies, with books, it's often on the cover, it's the poster, there's a call to action. And so I think one of the great challenges with content, you can have an amazing story, an amazingly engaging bit of content, but how do you even get people to go to it? And that's very challenging. I think some of the ones that we saw with the World Media Group competition, the awards that we were looking at last year, they were immediately engaging because they involved competitions and interactivity, and they pulled you in. And once you're in, then it's great.
Quite a few different models in the go right now, which is quite interesting. So at Bloomberg Media, what we're doing, we have specialists in-house. So we have video creative directors who know their craft, and they've been on the camera and they've done that. And now they're taking more of a project management role. So when they farm out, if we're working in, because we work multi-market, so obviously if they need to get a crew of 8 together in Bologna, then they know how to talk to these guys, the language to talk to the production people, and we do the same with editorial, we do the same with art design as well, and then we have project managers, and so I mean, it's a crossover. I think you do need a certain level of understanding and people on the tools in-house as well, because also what invariably happens is just those last minute tweaks, which a client really want. If you can't do those in-house, is every time you're going out back to, when you're talking about big sort of production 3-4 minute videos, and every time if you're having to pay for studio time and you're having to remix this, actually at that point it's really good that we've got specialists who can do all the final bits and save quite a lot of money actually. And also having a certain amount of knowledge in-house also means that your brand values.
Meeting deadlines is hard. Client approvals are hard. Media owner approvals are hard. Going live is difficult.
Yes.
You need dedicated resource, 100% to managing that.
So
if you're trying to do that on top of planning, if you're trying to do that on top of strategy, good luck with your 14-hour day.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I have to say our project manager, I count those as specialists as well.
Yeah,
they make sure everything's on track. And in the journalist world, they are absolutely mapped the same as the production desk. They're the subs and I've realised coming in, actually they're valuable just to keep it all going.
With them is they're not, I think if you're creatively developing something, you can get very personally attached to how that looks and what that is. Project managers, one of the beauties of them is they are there to get stuff done.
That happens a lot. In fact, it happens 9 out of 10 times when a brief will come through and we'll be asked to respond on a partnership or a creative idea in less than a week. Which is ridiculous. And
week would be great.
Yeah, a week would be great.
I know your situation sounds much worse, but it's incredibly it's true. What you're saying is that we all need to learn to push back and almost educate the clients that in order to come back with something that's well thought through and that has a very, a combination of different teams who've had the chance to look at the brief and respond to the brief, so that the response you get is a lot more joined up across the different elements, either from the media owner perspective or the agency perspective. It's just educating clients that responses to briefs cannot be turned around in a day.